Hello, friends. Welcome to the Morgan Library's Word of Mouth broadcast. Word of Mouth is an adult story time presented by the Julie Hampton Morgan Memorial Library. New stories are presented every month on the second Sunday of the month at 2:30 p.m. As a reminder, these stories contain adult content and language. It is recommended to review these stories before allowing younger audiences to listen. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Morgan Library's Reference Department's Word of Mouth for August. I'm Will Byrne. I'm a reference librarian here at the Morgan Library. This month, we have decided to have a celebration of J.R.R. Tolkien and his wonderful mythology. Did you know that the Rings of Power series and the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit are all the second and last parts of his cosmology? Most of the action of J.R.R. Tolkien's story take place in the First Age, where the Ainur come and create the world, and they wage war on the first of the great Dark Lords, Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world, to recover the light of the world encapsulated in the three gems, the Silmarils. What we're going to be reading today is one of his later versions of the story called The Children of Hurin. This particular man warrior in the series who has a traditional and somewhat tragic life. Anyway, hope you enjoy the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. The Children of Hurin, Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The Childhood of Turin. Hador Goldenhead was a lord of the Edain, and well loved by the Eldar. He dwelt while his days lasted under the lordship of Fingolfin, who gave to him wide lands in that region of Hithlum which was called Dor-lómin. His daughter Glorhithel wedded Haldir, son of Halmir, lord of the men of Brethil, and at the same feast his son Galdor the Tall wedded Harith, the daughter of Halmir. Galdor and Harith had two sons, Hurin and Huor. Hurin was by 3 years the elder, but he was shorter in stature than other men of his kin. In this he took after his mother's people, but in all else he was like Hador, his grandfather, strong in body and fiery of mood. But the fire burned in him steadily, and he had great endurance at will. Of all men of the north he knew most of the counsels of the Noldor, the elves. Huor, his brother, was tall, the tallest of all the Edain, the men, save his own son Tuor only, and a swift runner. But if the race were long and hard, Hurin would be the first home, for he ran as strongly at the end of the course as at the beginning. There was great love between the brothers, and they were seldom apart in their youth. Hurin wedded Morwen, the daughter of Beregund, son of Bregolas of the house of Beor, and she was thus of close kin to Beren one hand. Morwen was dark-haired and tall, and the light of her glance and the beauty of her face men called her Elethwin, the elven fair, but she was somewhat stern of mood and proud. The sorrows of the house of Beor saddened her heart, for she came as an exile to Dor-lómin from Dorthlonion after the ruin of the Bragollach. Turin was the name of the eldest child of Hurin and Morwen, and he was born in that year in which Beren came to Doriath and found Luthien Tinuviel, Thingol's daughter. Morwen bore a daughter also to Hurin, and she was named Orwin, but she was called Lalaith, which is laughter, by all who knew her in her short life. Huor wedded Rhiann, the cousin of Morwen. She was the daughter of Beregund, son of Bregolas. By hard fate was she born into such days, for she was gentle of heart and loved neither hunting nor war. Her love was given to trees and to the flowers of the wild, and she was a singer and maker of songs. 2 months only had she also been wedded to Huor when he went with his brother to the Nereth Arnoediad, and she never saw him again. But now the tale turns to Hurin and Huor in the days of their youth. It is said that for a time the sons of Galdor dwelt in Brethil as foster sons of Haldor their uncle, after the custom of northern men in those days. They often went to battle with the men of Brethil against the orcs, who now harried the northern borders of their land, for Hurin, though only 17 years of age, was strong, and Huor the younger was already as tall as most full-grown people of that people. On a time, Hurin and Huor went with a company of scouts, but they were ambushed by the orcs and scattered, and the brothers were pursued to the ford of Brechiac. There they would have been taken or slain, but for the power of the Enur Olmo that was still strong in the waters of Sirion. And it is said that a mist rose from the river and hid them from their enemies, and they escaped over the Brithiac into Dimbar. There they wandered in great hardship among the walls beneath the sheer walls of the Crisagrim, the mountains, until they were bewildered in the deceits of that land, and knew not the way to go on or to return. There Thorondor, lord of the eagles, espied them, and he sent 2 of his eagles to their aid. And the eagles bore them up and brought them beyond the encircling mountains to the hidden vale of Tumladin and the hidden city of Gondolin, which no man had yet seen. There Turgon the king received them well when he learned of their kin, for Hador was an elf friend, and Olmo, moreover, had counseled Turgon to deal kindly with the sons of that house, from whom help should come to him at need. Hurin and Huor dwelt as guests in the king's house for well nigh a year, and it is said that in this time Hurin, whose mind was swift and eager, gained much lore of the elves, and learned also something of the counsels and purposes of the king. For Turgon took great liking for the sons of Galdor, and spoke much with them, and he wished indeed to keep them in Gondolin out of love, and not only for his law that no stranger, be he elf or man, who found the way to the secret kingdom or looked upon the city should ever depart again, until the king should open the leaguer and the hidden people should come forth. But Hurin and Huor decided to return to their own people and share the wars and griefs that are now beset. And Hurin said to Tuor, Lord, we are but mortal men, and unlike the Eldar. They may endure for long years awaiting battle with their enemies in some far distant day, but with us the time is short, and our hope and strength soon wither. Moreover, we did not find the road to Gondolin, and indeed we do not know surely where the city stands, for we were brought in fear and wonder by the highways of the air, and in mercy our eyes were veiled. Then Turgon granted his prayer and said, By the way that you have came, you have leave to depart, if Thorondor is willing. I grieve at this parting, yet in a little while, as the Eldar accounted, we may meet again. But Maeglin, the king's sister's son, who was mighty in Gondolin, grieved not at all at their going, though he begrudged them the favor of the king, for he had no love for any of the kindred of man. And he said to Hurin, The king's grace is greater than you know, and some might wonder wherefore the strict laws abated for 2 knave children of men. It would be safer if they had no choice but to abide here as our servants till their life's end. The king's grace is great indeed, answered Hurin, but if our word is not enough, then we will swear oaths to you. And the brothers swore never to reveal the counsels of Turgon, and to keep secret all that they had seen in his realm. Then they took their leave, and the eagles coming bore them away by night, and set them down in Dorlomen before the dawn. Their kinsfolk rejoiced to see them, for messengers from Brethil had reported that they were lost, but they would not even tell their father where they had been, save that they were rescued in the wilderness by the eagles that brought them home. But Galdor said, Did you dwell there a year in the wild? Or did the eagles house you in their eyries? But you found food and fine raiment, and returned as princes, not as waifs of the wood. Be content, father, said Hurin, that we have returned, for only under an oath of silence was this permitted. That oath is still on us. Then Galdor questioned them no more, but he and his many followers guessed at the truth, for both the oath of silence and the eagles pointed to Turgon, men thought. So the days passed, and the shadow of the fear of Morgoth lengthened. But in the 469th day after the return of the Noldor to Middle-earth, there was a stirring of hope among elves and men, for rumor ran among them of the deeds of Beren and Luthien, and the putting to shame of Morgoth even upon his throne in Angband, and some said that Beren and Luthien yet lived, or had returned from the dead. In that year also the great councils of Methros were almost complete, and with the reviving strength of the Eldar and the Edain, the advance of Morgoth was stayed, and the orcs were driven back from Beleriand. Then some began to speak of victories to come, and of redressing the battle of the Dagor Bragolak, when Methros should lead forth the united hosts and drive Morgoth underground and seal the doors of Angband. But the wiser were uneasy still, fearing that Mathros the elf revealed his growing strength too soon, and that Morgoth would be given time enough to take counsel against him. Ever will some new evil be hatched in Angband beyond the guess of men and elves, they said. And in the autumn of that year, to point their words, there came an ill wind from the north under leaden skies. The evil breath it was called, for it was pestilent, and many sickened and died in the fall of the year in the northern lands that bordered on the Anphalact, and they were for the most part the children or the rising youth in the houses of men. In that year, Turin, son of Hurin, was yet only 5 years old, and Erwin his sister was 3 in the beginning of spring. Her hair was like the yellow lilies in the grass as she ran in the fields, and her laughter was like the sound of a merry stream that came singing out of the hills past the walls of her father's house. Ninlalaith it was called, and after it all the people of the household called the child Lalaith, and their houses were glad, and their hearts were glad while she was among them. But Turin was loved less than she. He was dark-haired as his mother, and promised to be like her in mood also. For he was not married, and spoke little, though he learned to speak early, and ever seemed older than his years. Turin was slow to forget injustice or mockery, but the fire of his father was also in him, and he could be sudden and fierce. Yet was he quick to pity, and the hurts or sadness of living things might move him to tears, and he was like his father in this also, for Morwen was stern with others as with herself. He loved his mother, for her speech to him was forthright and plain, but his father he saw little, for Hurin was often long away from home with the host of Fingon that guarded Hithlum's eastern borders. And when he returned, his quick speech, full of strange words and jests and half-meanings, bewildered Turin and made him uneasy. At that time all the warmth of his heart was for Lalaith his sister, but he played with her seldom, and liked better to guard her unseen, and to watch her going upon grass or under tree, as she sang such songs as the children of the Edain made long ago, when the tongue of elves was still fresh upon their lips. Fair as an elf child is Lalaith, said Hurin to Morwen, but briefer, alas, and so fairer maybe, or dearer. And Turin, hearing these words, pondered them, but could not understand them, for he had seen no elf children. None of the Edain of the Eldar at that time dwelt in his father's lands, and only once before had he seen them, when King Fingon and many of his lords had ridden through Dorloman and passed over the village of Ninlalaith, glittering in silver and white. But before the years were out, the truth of his father's words were shown, for the evil breath came to Dorloman, and Turin took sick, and lay long in a fever and dark dream. And when he was healed, for such was his fate and the strength of life that was in him, he asked for Lalaith. But his nurse replied, Speak no more of Lalaith, son of Hurin, but of your sister Erwin you must ask tidings of your mother. And when Morwen came to him, Turin said to her, I am no longer sick, and I wish to see Erwin, but why must I not say Lalaith any more? Because Erwin is dead, and laughter is stilled in this house, she answered. But you live, son of Morwen, and so does the enemy who has done this to us. She did not seek to comfort him any more than herself, for she met her grief in silence and coldness of heart. But Hurin mourned openly, and he took up his harp and would make a song of lamentation, but he could not, and he broke his harp, and going out he lifted up his hand towards the north, crying, Martyr of Middle-earth, would that I might see you face to face, and mar you as my lord Fingolfin did. But Turin wept bitterly at night alone, though to Morwen he never spoke again the name of his sister. To one friend only he turned at that time, and to him he spoke of his sorrow and the emptiness of his house. This friend was named Sador, a houseman in the service of Hurin. He was lame and of small account. He had been a woodman, and by ill luck or the mishandling of his axe he had hewn his right foot, and the footless leg had shrunken, and Turin called him Labadel, which is Hopperfoot, though the name did not displease Sador, for it was given in pity and not in scorn. Sador worked in the outbuildings, to make or mend things of little worth that was needed in the house, for he had some skill in the working of wood, and Turin would fetch him what he lacked to spare his leg, and sometimes he would carry off secretly some tool or piece of timber that he found unwatched, if he thought his friend could use it. Then Sador smiled, but bade him return the gifts to their places. Give with a free hand, but give only your own, he said. He rewarded as he could the kindness of the child, and carved for him the figures of men and beasts. But Turin delighted most in Sador's trials and tales, for he had been a young man in the days of Bragolac, and loved to dwell upon the short days of his full manhood before his maiming. That was a great battle, they say, son of Turin. I was called from my tasks in the wood in the need of that year, but I was not in the Bragolac, or I might have got my hurt with more honour. For we came too late, save to bear back the bier of our old lord Hador, who fell in the guard of King Fingolfin. I went for a soldier after that, and I was in Sirion, the great fort of the elf kings, for many years, or so it seems now, and the dull years since have little to mark them. In Sirion I was there when the Black King assailed it, and Galdor, your father's father, was a captain there in the king's stead. He was slain in that assault, and I saw your father take up his lordship in his command, though but new come to manhood. There was a fire in him that made a sword hot in his hand, they say. Behind him we drove the orcs into the sand, and they have not dared to come within sight of the walls since that day. But alas, my love of blood was sated, for I had seen spilled blood and wounds enough, and I got leave to come back to the woods that I longed for. And there I got my heart, for a man that flies from his fear may find that he has only taken a short cut to meet it. In this way, Sador would speak to Turin as he grew older, and Turin began to ask many questions that Sador found hard to answer, thinking that others nearer akin should have the teaching. And one day Turin said to him, "Was Lanaith indeed like an elf child, as my father said? And what did he mean when he said that she was briefer?" "Oh, very like," said Sador, "for in their first youth the children of men and elves seem close akin. But the children of men grow more swiftly, and our youth passes soon, as such is our fate." Then Turin said to him, "Well, what is fate?" "As to the fate of men," said Sador, "you must ask those that are wiser than Labadel. But as all can see, we weary soon and die, and by mischance many meet death or even sooner. But the elves do not weary, and they do not die save by great hurt. From wounds and griefs that would slay men they may be healed, and even when their bodies are marred they return again, some say. It is not so with us." "Then Lanaith will not come back?" said Turin. "Where has she gone?" "She will not come back," said Sador, "but where she has gone no man knows, or I do not." "Has it always been so? Or do we suffer some curse of the wicked king, perhaps, like the evil breath?" "I do not know. A darkness lies beyond us, and out of it few tales have come. The fathers of our fathers may have had things to tell, but they did not tell them. Even their names are forgotten. The mountains stand between us and the life that they came from, flying from what no man knows now." "Were they afraid?" said Turin. "It may be," said Sador. "It may be that we fled from the fear of the dark, only to find it here before us, and nowhere else to go but the sea." "We are not afraid any longer," said Turin. "Not all of us. My father is not afraid, and I will not be, or at least, as my mother, I will be afraid and not show it." It seemed then to Sador that Turin's eyes were not the eyes of a child, and he thought, "Grief is a home to a hard mind." But aloud he said, "Son of Hurin and Morwen, how it will be with your heart Labadel cannot guess, but seldom and to few will you show what is in it." Then Turin said, "Perhaps it is better not to tell what you wish, if you cannot have it. But I wish, Labadel, that I were one of the Eldar. Then Lanaith might come back, and I should still be here, even if she were long away. I shall go with a soldier with an elf king as soon as I am able, as you did, Labadel." "You may learn much of them," said Sador, and he sighed. "They are a fair folk, and wonderful, and they have a power over the hearts of men. And yet I think sometimes that it might have been better if we had never met them, but had walked in lowlier ways. For already they are ancient in knowledge, and they are proud and enduring. In their light we are damned, or we burn with too quick a flame, and the weight of our doom lies the heavier on us." "But my father loves them," said Turin, "and he is not happy without them. He says that we have learned nearly all that we know from them, and have been made a nobler people. And he says that the men that have but lately come over the mountains are hardly better than orcs. All that is true, answered Sutter, true at least of some of us. But the up-climbing is painful, and from high places it is easy to fall low. At this time, Hurin was almost 8 years old, in the month of Gweron, in the reckoning of the Dane, in the year that cannot be forgotten. Already there were rumors among his elders of a great mustering and gathering of arms, of which Hurin heard nothing, though he marked that his father often looked steadfastly at him, as a man that might look at something dear that he must part from. Now Hurin, knowing her courage and her guarded tongue, spoke often with Morwen of the designs of the elven kings, and what might befall, if they went well or ill. His heart was high with hope, and he had little fear for the outcome of the battle, for it did not seem to him that any strength in Middle-earth could overthrow the might and the splendor of the Eldar. They have seen the light in the west, he said, and in the end darkness must flee from their faces. Morwen did not gainsay him, for in Hurin's company the hopeful ever seemed the more likely. Yet there was knowledge of elven lore in her kindred also, and to herself she said, "And yet did not they leave the light? And are they not now shut out from it? It may be that the lords of the west have put them out of their thought, and then how can even the elder children overcome one of the powers?" No shadow of doubt seemed to lie on Hurin Thalion. Yet one morning in the spring of that year he woke heavy as after an unquiet sleep, and a cloud lay on his brightness that day, and in the evening he said suddenly, "When I am summoned, Morwen Elethwin, I shall leave in your keeping the heir of the house of Hador. The lives of men are short, and in them there are many ill chances, even in time of peace." "That has ever been so," she answered. "But what lies under your words?" "Prudence, not doubt," said Hurin, though he looked troubled. "But one who looks forward must see this, that things will not remain as they were. This will be a great throw, and one side must fall lower than it now stands. If it be the elven kings that fall, then it must go evilly with the Edain, and we dwell nearest the enemy. This land might pass into his dominion. But if things do go ill, I will say to you, do not be afraid, for you fear what should be feared, and that only, and fear does not dismay you. But I say, do not wait. I shall return to you as I may, but do not wait. Go south as swiftly as you can. If I live, I shall follow you, and I shall find you, though I have to search through all Beleriand." "Beleriand is wide and houseless for exiles," said Morwen. "Whither should I flee, with few or with many?" Then Hurin thought for a while in silence. "There is my mother's kin in Brethil," he said. "That is some 30 leagues, as the eagle flies. If such an evil time should indeed come, what help would there be in men?" said Morwen. "The house of Beor has fallen. If the great house of Hador falls, in what holes should the little folk of Haleth creep?" "In such as they can find," said Hurin. "But do not doubt their valor, though they are few and unlearned. Where else is hope?" "You do not speak of Gondolin," said Morwen. "No, for that name has never passed my lips," said Hurin. "Yet the word is true that you have heard. I have been there. But I tell you now truly, as I have told no other and will not. I do not know where it stands." "But you guess, and guess near, I think," said Morwen. "It may be so," said Hurin. "But unless Turgon himself released me from my oath, I could not tell that guess, even to you, and therefore your search would be in vain. But were I to speak, to my shame, you would at best but come at a shut gate. For unless Turgon comes to war, and of that no word is heard, and it is not hoped, no one will come in." "Then if your kin are not hopeful, and your friends deny you," said Morwen, "I must take counsel for myself, and to me now comes the thought of Doriath." "Ever your aim is high," said Hurin. "Over high, you would say," said Morwen. "But last of all defences will the girdle of Melian be broke, I think, and the house of Beor will not be despised in Doriath. Am I not now kin of the king? For Beren son of Berahir was grandson of Begor, as was my father also." "My heart does not lead to Thingol," said Hurin. "No help will come to him from him to King Fingon. and I know not what shadow falls on my spirit when Doriath is named. At the name of Brethel, my heart also is darkened, said Morwen. Then suddenly Huron laughed and said, Here we sit, debating things beyond our reach and shadows that come out of dream. Things will not go so ill, but if they do, then to your courage and counsel all is committed. Do then what your heart bids you, but do it swiftly. And if we gain our ends, then the elven kings are resolved to restore all the fiefs of Bedor's house to his heir, and that is you, Morwen's daughter of Beregond. Wide lordships we should then wield, and a high inheritance come to our son. Without the malice in the north, he should come to great wealth, and be a king among men. Hurin Thalion, said Morwen, this I trudge truer to say, that you look high, but I fear to fall low. Then at the worst you need not fear, said Hurin. That night Turin half woke, and it seemed to him that his father and mother stood beside his bed, and looked down on him in the light of the candles that they held, but he could not see their faces. On the morning of Turin's birthday, Hurin gave his son a gift, an elf-wrought knife, and the hilt and the sheath was silver and black. He said, Heir of the house of Hador, here is a gift for the day, but have a care. It is a bitter blade, and steel serves only those that can wield it. It will cut your hand as willingly as aught else. And setting Turin over on a table, he kissed his son, and said, You overtop me already, son of Morwen. Soon you will be as high as your own feet, and that day many may fear your blade. Then Turin ran from the room and went away alone, and in his heart was a warmth like the warmth of the sun upon the cold earth that sets growth astir. He repeated to himself his father's words, Heir of the house of Hador, but other words came also to his mind. Give with a free hand, but give of your own. And he went to Sador and cried, Labadel, it is my birthday, the birthday of the heir of the house of Hador, and I have brought you a gift to mark the day. Here is a knife, just such as you need. It will cut anything that you wish, as fine as hair. And Sador was troubled, for he knew well that Turin had himself received the knife that day. But men held it a grievous thing to refuse a free-given gift from any hand. He spoke then to him gravely, You come of a generous kin, Turin, son of Hurin. I have done nothing to equal your gift, and I cannot hope to do better in the days that are left to me. But what I can do, I will. And when Sador drew the knife from the sheath, he said, this is a gift indeed. A blade of elven steel. Long have I missed the feel of it. Hurin soon marked that Turin did not wear the knife, and he asked him whether his warning had made him fear it. Then Turin answered, No, but I gave the knife to Sador, the woodwright. Do you scorn then your father's gift? Said Morwen, and again Turin answered, No, but I love Sador, and I am sorry for him. Then Hurin said, All three gifts were your own to give, Turin, love, pity, and the knife the least. Yet I doubt if Sador deserves them, said Morwen. He is self-maimed by his own want of skill, and he is slow with his tasks, for he spends much time on trifles unbidden. Give him pity none the less, said Hurin. An honest man and a true heart may hew amiss, and the harm may be harder to bear than the work of a foe. But you must wait now for another blade, said Morwen. Thus the gift shall be a true gift, and at your own cost. None the less, Turin marked that Sador was treated more kindly thereafter, and was set now to the making of a great chair for the lord to sit in his hall. There came a great morning in the month of Lothron, when Turin was roused by sudden trumpets, and running to the doors he saw in the court a great press of men on foot and on horse, and all fully armed as if for war. There also stood Hurin, and he spoke to the men and gave commands. And Turin learned that they were setting out that day for Bered Ethel. These were Hurin's guards and household men, but all the men of his land that could be spared were summoned. Some had gone already with Hur, his father's brother, and many others would join the lord of Dorlomen on the road, and go behind his banner to the great muster of the king. Then Morwen bade farewell to Hurin without tears, and she said, I will guard what you leave in my keeping, both what is and what shall be. And Hurin answered her, Farewell, lady of Dotloman. We ride now with greater hope than ever we have known before. Let us think that at this midwinter feast shall be merrier than in all our years yet, and with a fearless spring to follow after. Then he lifted Turin to his shoulder and cried to his men, Let the heir of the house of Hadar see the light of your swords. And the sun glittered on 50 blades as they leaped forth, and the court rang out with the battle cry of the Edain of the north, Lackle Kalad, Dragoborn, flame light, fear night. Then at last Hurin sprung into his saddle, and his golden banners unfurled, and the trumpets sang again in the morning, and thus Hurin Thalion rode away to the Nanaeth Arnoediad. But Turin and Morwen stood still by the doors, until far away they heard the faint call of a single horn on the wind. Hurin had passed over the shoulder of the hill, beyond which he could see his house no more. Chapter 2. The Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Many songs are yet sung, and many tales are yet told by the elves of the Nanaeth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, in which Fingon fell and the flower of the Eldar withered. If all were now told, a man's life would not suffice for the hearing. Here then shall be recounted only those deeds which bear upon the fate of the house of Hador and the children of Hurin the Steadfast. Having gathered at length all the strength that he could, Mathros appointed a day, the morning of midsummer. On that day the trumpets of the Eldar greeted the rising of the sun, and in the east was raised the standard of the sons of Fëanor, and in the west the standard of Fingon, the king of the Noldor. Then Fingon looked up from the walls of Ethel-Sirion, and his host was arrayed in the valleys and woods upon the east of Ered Wethman, well hid from the eyes of the enemy, but he knew that it was very great. For there all the Noldor of Hithlum were assembled, and to them were gathered many elves of the Falas and of Nargothrond, and he had great strength of men. Upon the right was stationed the host of Dotloman, and all the valor of Hurin and Huor his brother, and to them had come Haldir of Brethel, their kinsman, with many men of the woods. Then Fingon looked east, and his elven sight saw far off a dust and the glint of steel like stars in a mist, and he knew that Mathros had set forth, and he rejoiced. Then he looked towards Thangordrum, the lair of the enemy, and there was a dark cloud about it, and a black smoke went up, and he knew that the challenge of Morgoth was kindled, and that their challenge would be accepted, and a shadow of doubt fell about his heart. But at that moment a cry went up, passing on the wind from the south from vale to vale, and the elves and men lifted up their voices in wonder and joy. For unsummoned and unlooked for, Turgon had opened the leaguer of Gondolin, and was come with an army 10,000 strong, with bright mail and long swords and spears like a forest. Then when Fingon heard afar the great trumpet of Turgon, the shadow was past, and his heart was uplifted, and he shouted aloud, The day has come! Behold, people of the Eldar and fathers of men, the day has come! And all those who heard his great voice echo in the hills answered, crying, The night is passing! It was not long before the great battle was joined, for Morgoth knew much of what was done and designed by his foes, and laid his plans against the hour of their assault. Already a great force out of Angband was drawing near to Hithlum, while another and greater went to meet Mathros to prevent the union of the powers of the kings. And those that came against Fingon were clad all in dun raiment, and showed no naked steel, and thus were already far over the sands of Mount Faglith before their approach became known. Then the hearts of the Noldor grew hot, and their captains wished to assail their foes on the plain, but Fingon spoke against this. Beware of the guile of Morgoth lords, he said. Ever his strength is more than it seems, and his purpose other than he reveals. Do not reveal your own strength, yet let the enemy spend his first assault upon the hills. For it was the design of the kings that Mathros should march openly over the Anfaglith with all his strength, of elves, of men, and of dwarves, and when he had drawn forth, as he hoped, the main armies of Morgoth in answer, then Fingon should come on from the west, and so the might of Morgoth should be taken as between hammer and anvil and be broken to pieces. And the signal for this was to be the firing of a great beacon in Dorthoni. But the captain of Morgoth in the west had been commanded to draw out Fingon from his hills by whatever means he could. He marched on, therefore, until the front of his battle showed up before the stream of Syrian, from the walls of the Barad Ethel to the fen of Serik, and the outposts of Fingon could see the eyes of their enemies. But there were no answer to his challenge, and the taunts of his orcs faltered as they looked upon the silent walls and the hidden threat of the hills. Then the captain of Morgoth sent out riders with tokens of parley, and they rode up before the very walls of the outworks of the Barad Ethel. With them they brought Gelmir, son of Gwilyn, a lord of Nargothrond, whom they had captured in the previous battle, the Dagor Bragollach, and had blinded. And their heralds showed him forth, crying, "We have many more such at home, but you must make haste if you would find them, for we shall deal with them all when we return, even so." And they hewed off Gelmir's arms and legs and left him. By ill chance, at that point in the outposts stood Gwyndor, son of Gwilyn, with many folk of Nargothrond. And indeed he had marched to war with such strength as he could gather, because of his grief for the taking of his brother. Now his wrath was like a flame, and he leapt forth on horseback, and many riders with him, and they pursued the heralds of Angband and slew them, and all the folk of Nargothrond followed after, and they drove on deep into the ranks of Angband. And seeing this, the host of the Noldor was set on fire, and Fingon put on his white helm and sounded his trumpets, and all his host leapt forth from the hills in sudden onslaught. The light of the drawing of the swords of the Noldor was like a fire in a field of reeds, and so swift and fell their onslaught that almost the designs of Morgoth went astray. Before the decoying army that he had sent west could be strengthened, it was swept away and destroyed, and the banners of Fingon passed over the Angfagleth and were raised before the walls of Angband. Ever in that forefront of that battle went Gwyndor and the folk of Nargothrond, and even now they could not be restrained, and they burst through the outer gates and slew the guards within the very courts of Angband, and Morgoth trembled upon his deep throne, hearing them beat upon his doors. But Gwyndor was trapped there, and taken alive, and his folk slain, for Fingon could not come to his aid. By many secret doors in Thangorodrim, Morgoth let forth his main strength that he had held in waiting, and Fingon was beaten back with great loss from the walls of Angband. Then in the plain of the Anfagleth, on the 4th day of the war, there began the Nanoeth Anuidiad, all the sorrow of which no tale can contain. Of all that befell in the eastward battle, of the routing of Glaurung the dragon by the dwarves of Belegost, of the treachery of the Easterlings and the overthrow of the host of Mathros and the flight of the sons of Fëanor, no more here is said. In the west, the host of Fingon retreated over the sands, and there fell Haldir, son of Halmir, and most of the men of Brethil. But on the 5th day, as night fell, and they were still far from Ered Wethwin, the armies of Angband surrounded the army of Fingon, and they fought until day, pressed ever closer. In the morning came hope, for the horns of Turgon were sounded, as he marched up with the main host of Gondolin, for Turgon had been stationed southward guarding the passes of Syrian, and he had restrained most of his folk from the rash onslaught. Now he hastened to his brother, and the Noldor of Gondolin was strong, and their ranks shone like a river of steel in the sun. For the sword and harness of the least of the warriors of Turgon was worth more than the ransom of any king among men. Now the phalanx of the guard of the king broke through the ranks of the orcs, and Turgon hewed his way to the side of his brother. And it is said that the meeting of Turgon with Hurin, who stood beside Fingon, was glad in the midst of the battle. For a while then the hosts of Angband were driven back, and Fingon again began his retreat. But having routed Mathros in the east, Morgoth had great forces to spare, and before Fingon and Turgon could come to the shelter of the hills, they were assailed by a tide of foes thrice greater than all the force that was left to them. Gothmog, high captain of Angband, was come, and he drove a dark wedge between the elven hosts, surrounding King Fingon and thrusting Turgon and Hurin aside towards the fen of Serik. Then he turned on Fingon. That was a grim meeting. At last, Fingon stood alone with his guard dead about him, and he fought with Gothmog, until a Balrog came behind him and cast a thong of steel round him. Then Gothmog hewed him with his black axe, and a white flame sprang up from the helm of Fingon as it was cloven. Thus fell the king of the Noldor, and they beat him into the dust with their maces, and his banner, blue and silver, they trod into the mire of his blood. The field was lost, but still Hurin and Huor and the remnant of the house of Hador stood firm with Turgon of Gondolin, and the hosts of Morgoth could not yet win the passes of Sirion. Then Hurin spoke to Turgon, saying, "Go now, Lord, while time is, for you are the last of the house of Fingolfin, and in you lives the last hope of the Eldar. While Gondolin stands, Morgoth shall still know fear in his heart." "Not long now can Gondolin remain hidden, and being discovered it must fall," said Turgon. "Yet if it stands only a little while," said Huor, "then out of your house shall come the hope of elves and men. This I say to you, Lord, with the eyes of death, though we part here forever, and I shall not look upon your white walls again. From you and from me a new star shall arise. Farewell." Maeglin, Turgon's sister's son, who stood by, heard these words, and did not forget them. Then Turgon took the counsel of Hurin and Huor, and he gave orders that his host should begin a retreat into the passes of Sirion, and his captains Ecthelion and Glorfindel guarded the flanks to right and left, so that none of the enemies should pass them by, for the only road in that region was narrow, and ran near the west bank of the growing stream of Sirion. But the men of Dor Lomin held the rear guard, as Hurin and Huor wished, for they did not wish in their hearts to escape from the Northlands, and if they could not win back to their homes, then they would stand to the end. So it was that Turgon fought his way southward, until coming behind the guard of Hurin and Huor, he passed down Sirion and escaped, and he vanished into the mountains and was hidden from the eyes of Morgoth. But the brothers drew the remnant of the mighty men of the house of Hador about them, and foot by foot they withdrew, until they came behind the fen of Serek and had the stream of Rivil before them. There they stood and gave way no more. Then all the hosts of Angband swarmed against them, and they bridged the stream with their dead, and encircled the remnant of Hithlum as a gathering tide about a rock. There, as the sun westered and the shadows of the Ered Wethrin grew dark, Huor fell pierced with a venomed arrow in the eye, and all the valiant men of Hador were slain about him in the heap, and the orcs hewed their heads and piled them as a mound of gold in the sunset. Last of all, Hurin stood alone. Then he cast aside his shield, and seized the axe of an orc captain, and wielded it two-handed. And it is sung that the axe smoked in the black blood of the troll god of Gothmog until it withered. And each time that he slew, Hurin cried aloud, "Day shall come again!" 70 times he uttered that cry, but they took him at last alive by the command of Morgoth, who thought thus to do him more evil than by death. Therefore the orcs grappled Hurin with their arms, which clung to him still, though he hewed off their arms, and ever their numbers were renewed, till he fell buried beneath them. Then Gothmog bound him, and dragged him to Angband with mockery. Thus ended the Nerwaeth Arnoediad, as the sun went down beyond the sea. Night fell in Hithlum, and there came a great storm of wind out of the west. Great was the triumph of Morgoth, though not all the purpose of his malice was yet accomplished. One thought troubled him deeply, and marred his victory with unquiet. Turgon had escaped his net. Of all his foes, the one whom he had most desired to take or destroy. But for Turgon of the great house of Fingolfin was now by right king of all the Noldor, and Morgoth feared and hated the house of Fingolfin, because they had scorned him in Valinor, and had the friendship of Ulmo his foe, and because of the wounds that Fingolfin had gave to him in battle. And most of all, Morgoth feared Turgon, for of old in Valinor his eye had lighted on him, and whenever he drew near, a dark shadow had fallen on his spirit, foreboding that in some time that yet lay hidden in doom, from Turgon ruin should come to him. Chapter 3. The Words of Hurin and Morgoth. Now by the command of Morgoth, the orcs with great labor gathered all the bodies of their enemies, and all their harness and weapons, and piled them in a mound in the midst of the plain of Anfaglith, and it was like a great hill that could be seen from afar, and the Eldar named it Hoth et Nerneath. But grass came there, and grew again long and green upon that hill alone in all the desert, and no servant of Morgoth ever after trod upon the earth beneath which the swords of the Eldar and the Edain crumbled into rust. The realm of Fingon was no more, and the sons of Fëanor wandered as leaves before the wind. To Hithlum none of the men of Hador's house returned, nor any tidings of the battle and the fate of their lords. But Morgoth sent thither men who were under his dominion, swarthy Easterlings, and he shut them in that land and forbade them to leave it. This was all that he gave them of the rich rewards that he had promised them for their treachery to Mathros, to plunder and harass the old and the children and womenfolk of Hador's people. The remnant of the Eldar of Hithlum, all those who did not escape into the wilds and the mountains, he took to the mines of Angbad, and they became his thralls. But the orcs went freely through all the north, and pressed ever southward into Beleriand. There Doriath yet remained, and Nargothrond, but Morgoth gave little heed to them, either because he knew little of them, or because their hour was not yet to come in the designs of his malice. But his thought ever turned to Turgon. Therefore Hurin was brought before Morgoth, for Morgoth knew by his arts and his spies that Hurin had the friendship of the king, and he sought to daunt him with his eyes. But Hurin could not yet be daunted, and he defied Morgoth. Therefore Morgoth had him chained and set in slow torment. But after a while he came to him, and offered him his choice to go free whether he would, or to receive power and rank as the greatest of Morgoth's captains, if he would but reveal where Turgon had his stronghold, and aught else that he knew of the king's counsels. But Hurin Thalion the Steadfast mocked him, saying, Blind you are, Morgoth Baglir, and blind shall ever be, seeing only the dark. You know not what rules the hearts of men, and if you knew, you could not give it. But a fool is he who takes what Morgoth offers. You will take first the price, and then withhold the promise, and I should get only death if I told you what you ask. Then Morgoth laughed, and he said, Death you may yet crave of me as a boon. Then he took Hurin to the Hoth and Nerneath, and it was new built, and the reek of death was upon it. And Morgoth set Hurin upon its top, and bade him look west towards Hithlum, and think of his wife, and his son, and other kin. For they now dwell in my realm, said Morgoth, and they are at my mercy. You have none, answered Hurin, but you will not come at Turgon through them, for they do not know his secrets. Then wrath mastered Morgoth, and he said, Yet may I come at you, and all your cursed house, and you shall be broken on my will, though you are all made of steel. And he took up a long sword that lay there, and broke it before the eyes of Hurin, and a splinter wounded his face, but Hurin did not blench. Then Morgoth, stretching out his long arm towards Dothlom, cursed Hurin and Morwen and their offspring, saying, Behold, the shadow of my hate shall lie upon them wherever they go, and my hate shall pursue them to the ends of the world. But Hurin said, You speak in vain, for you cannot see them, nor govern them from afar, not while you keep this shape, and desire still to be a king on earth. Then Morgoth turned upon Hurin, and he said, Fool! Little among men, and they are the least of all that speak. Have you seen the Valar, or measured the power of Manwë and Varda? Do you know of the reach of their thought, or do you think perhaps that their thought is upon you, and that they may shield you from afar? I know not, said Hurin, yet it might be so still, if they willed, for the elder king shall not be dethroned while Ardor endures. You say it, said Morgoth. I am the elder king, Melkor, first and mightiest of all the Valar, who were before the world and made it. The shadow of my purpose lies upon Arda, and all that is in it bends slowly and surely to my will. But upon all whom you love my thought shall weigh as a cloud of doom, and it shall bring them down into darkness and despair. Wherever they go, evil shall arise. Whenever they speak, their words shall bring ill counsel. Whatsoever they do shall turn against them. They shall die without hope, cursing both life and death. But Hurin answered, Do you forget to whom you speak? Such things you spoke long ago to our fathers, but we escaped from your shadow. And now we have knowledge of you, for we have looked upon the faces that have seen the light, and heard the voices that have spoken with Manwë. Before Ardor you were, but others also, and you did not make it. Neither are you the most mighty, for you have spent your strength upon yourself and wasted it in your own emptiness. No more are you now than an escaped thrall of the Valar, and their chains still awaits you. You have learned the lessons of your masters by rote, said Morgoth. But such childish lore will not help you. Now they are all fled away. This last I will say to you, thrall Morgoth, said Hurin, and it comes not from the Lord of the Eldar, but is put into my heart in this hour. You are not the Lord of men, and shall not be, though all Arda and Menel fall in your dominion. Beyond the circles of the world you shall not pursue those who refuse you. Beyond the circles of the world I will not pursue them, said Morgoth. For beyond the circles of the world there is nothing, but within them they shall not escape me until they enter into nothing. You lie, said Hurin. You shall see, and you shall confess that I do not lie, said Morgoth. And taking Hurin back to Angband, he set him in a chair of stone upon a high place of Thangorodrim, far from which he could see afar the land of Hithlum in the west and the lands of Beleriand in the south. There he was bound by the power of Morgoth, and Morgoth, standing beside him, cursed him again, and set his power upon him, so he should not move from that place, nor die, until Morgoth should release him. Sit thou there, said Morgoth, and look out upon the lands where evil and despair shall come upon those whom you have delivered to me. For you have dared to mock me, and have questioned the power of Melkor, master of the fates of Arda. Therefore with my eyes shall you see, and with my ears you shall hear, and nothing shall be hidden from you. Chapter 4. The Departure of Turin. To Brethil 3 men only found their way back at last to Tar Nufwin, an evil road, and when Glorhethel, Hador's daughter, learned of the fall of Haldir, she grieved and died. To Dordlomen no tidings came. Rian, the wife of Huor, fled into the wild distraught, but she was aided by the grey elves of Mithrim, and when her child Tuor was born, they fostered him. But Rian went to the Hath en Nenaeth, and laid herself down there, and died. Morwen Elithwin remained in Hithlum, silent in grief. Her son Turin was only in his 9th year, and she was again with child. Her days were evil. The Easterlings came into the land in great numbers, and they dealt cruelly with the people of Hador, and robbed them of all that they possessed, and enslaved them. All the people of Hurin's homelands that could work or serve any purpose they took away, even young girls and boys, and the old they killed or drove out to starve. Yet they dared not lay hands on the lady of Dordlomen, or thrust her from her house, for the word ran among them that she was perilous, and a witch who had dealings with the white fiends, or so they named the elves, hating them, but fearing them more. For this reason they also feared and avoided the mountains, in which many of the Eldar had taken refuge, especially in the south of the land, and after plundering and harrying the Easterlings, drew back northwards. For Hurin's house stood in the southeast of Dordlomen, and the mountains were near. Ninladath indeed came down like a spring under the shadow of Daman Dwatar, under whose shoulder there was a steep pass. By this the hardy could cross Ered Wethrin, and come down by the walls of Githlui into Beleriand. But this was not known to the Easterlings, nor to Morgoth yet, for all that country, while the house of Fingolfin stood, was secure from him, and none of his servants had ever come there. He trusted that Ered Wethrin was a wall insurmountable, both against escape from the north and against assault from the south, and there was indeed no other pass, for the unwinged between Serek and War westward where Dordlomen marched with Nevrast. Thus it came to pass that after the first inroads Morwen was let be, though there were men that lurked in the woods about, and it was perilous to stir far abroad. There still remained under Morwen's shelter Sador the woodwright, and a few old men and women, and Turin, whom she kept close within the garth. But the homestead of Hurin soon fell into decay, and though Morwen laboured hard, she was poor, and would have gone hungry but for the help that was secretly lent her by Hurin, Hurin's kinswoman, for a certain Broda, one of the Easterlings, had taken her by force to be his wife. Alms were bitter to Morwen, but she took this aid for the sake of Turin and her unborn child, and because, as she said, it came of her own. For it was this Broda who had seized the people, the goods, and the cattle of Hurin's homelands, and had carried them off to his own dwellings. He was a bold man, but of small account among his own people before they came to Hithlum, and so, seeking wealth, he was ready to hold lands that others of his sort did not covet. Morwen he had seen once, when he rode to her house on a foray, but a dread great of her had seized him. He thought that he had looked in the fell eyes of a white fiend, and he was filled with a mortal fear lest some evil overtake him, and he did not ransack her house, nor discover Turin, yet else the life of the heir of the true Lord would have been short. Broda made thralls of the strawheads, as he named the people of Hador, and set them to build him a wooden hall in the land to the northward of Hurin's house, and within the stockade his slaves were herded like cattle in a byre, but ill-guarded. Among them some could still be found uncowed and ready to help the lady of Dorloman, even at their peril, and from them came secretly tidings of the land to Morwen, though there was little hope in the news they brought. But Broda took Erin as a wife and not a slave, for there were few women amongst his own following, and none to compare with the daughters of the Edain, and he hoped to make himself a lordship in that country, and have an heir after him to hold it. Of what had happened and what might happen in the days to come, Morwen said little to Turin, and he feared to break her silence with questions. When the Easterlings first came into Dorloman, he said to his mother, "When will my father come back, to cast out these ugly thieves? Why does he not come?" Morwen answered, "I do not know. It may be that he was slain, or he is held captive, or again it may be that he was driven far away, and cannot yet return through the foes that surround us." "Then I think that he is dead," said Turin, and before his mother he restrained his tears, for no one could keep him from coming back to help us, if he were alive. "I do not think that either of those things are true, my son," said Morwen. As the time lengthened, the heart of Morwen grew darker for her son Turin, heir of Dorloman and Ladros, for he could see no hope for him better than to become a slave of the Easterling men before he was much older. Therefore she remembered her words with Hurin, and her thought turned again to Doriath, and she resolved at last to send Turin away in secret, if she could, and to beg King Thingol to harbour him. And as she sat and pondered how this might be done, she heard clearly in her thought the voice of Hurin saying to her, "Go swiftly, do not wait for me." But the birth of her child was drawing near, and the road would be hard and perilous. The more that went, the less hope of escape. And her heart still cheated her with hope unadmitted. Her inmost thought foreboded that Hurin was not dead, and she listened for his footfall in the sleepless watches of the night, or would wake thinking that she had heard in the courtyard the neigh of Arak, his horse. Moreover, though she was willing that her son should be fostered in the halls of another, after the manner of that time, she would not yet humble her pride to be an alms guest, not even of a king. Therefore the voice of Hurin, or the memory of his voice, was denied, and the first strand of the fate of Turin was woven. Autumn of the year of lamentation was drawing on before Morwen came to this resolve, and then she was in haste, for the time for journeying was short, but she dreaded that Turin would be taken if she waited over winter. Easterlings were prowling round the garth and spying on the house. Therefore she said suddenly to Turin, "Your father does not come, so you must go, and soon. It is as he would wish." "Go?" cried Turin. "Whither shall we go? Over the mountains?" "Yes," said Morwen, "over the mountains, away south. South. That way some hope may lie. But I did not say we, my son. You must go, but I must stay." "I cannot go alone," said Turin. "I will not leave you. Why should we not go together?" I cannot go, said Morwen. But you will not go alone. I shall send Gethron with you, and Grethnir too, perhaps. Will you not send Labadel? Said Turin. No, for Sador is lame, said Morwen, and it will be a hard road. And since you are my son and the days are grim, I will not speak softly. You may die on that road. The year is getting late. But if you stay, you will come to a worse end, to be a thrall. If you wish to be a man, when you come to a man's age, you will do as I bid, bravely. But I shall leave you with only Sador, and blind Ragnir, and the old women, said Turin. Did not my father say that I am the heir of Hador? The heir should stay in Hador's house to defend it. Now I wish that I still had my knife. The heir should stay, but he cannot, said Morwen. But he may return one day. Now take heart. I will follow you if things grow worse, if I can. But how will you find me lost in the wild, said Turin, and suddenly his heart failed him, and he wept openly. If you wail, others things will find you first, said Morwen. But I know whither you are going, and if you come there, and if you remain there, there will I find you, if I can. For I am sending you to King Thingol and Doriath. Would you rather not be a king's guest than a thrall? I do not know, said Turin. I do not know what a thrall is. I am sending you away so that you need not learn it, Morwen answered. Then she set Turin before her and looked into his eyes as if she were trying to read some riddle there. It is hard, Turin, my son, she said at length. Not hard for you only. It is evil on me in evil days to judge what is best to do. But I do as I think right. For why else should I part with the thing most dear that is left to me? They spoke no more of this together, and Turin was grieved and bewildered. In the morning he went to find Sador, who had been hewing sticks for firing, of which they had little, for they dared not stray out into the woods. And now he leant on his crutch and looked at the great chair of Hurin, which had been thrust unfinished into a corner. It must go, he said, for only bare things can be served in these days. Do not break it yet, said Turin. Maybe he will come home, and then it will please him to see what you have done for him while he was away. False hearts are more dangerous than fears, said Sador, and they will not keep us warm this winter. He fingered the carving on this chair and sighed. I wasted my time, he said, though the hours seem pleasant. But all such things are short-lived, and the joy in the making is their only true end, I guess. And now I might as well give you back your gift. Turin put out his hand and quickly withdrew it. A man does not take back his gifts, he said. But if it is my own, may I not give it as well? Said Sador. Yes, said Turin, to any other man but me. But why should you wish to give it? I have no hope for using it for worldly tasks, said Sador. There will be no more work for Labadel in days to come but thrall work. What is a thrall? Said Turin. A man who was a man, but is treated as a beast, Sador answered. Fed only to keep alive, kept only to toil, toiling only for fear of pain or death. And from these robbers he may get pain or death just for their sport. I hear that they pick some of the fleet-footed and hunt them with hounds. They have learned quicker from the orcs than we've learned from the fair folk. Now I understand things better, said Turin. It is a shame that you should have to understand such things so soon, said Sador. Then, seeing the strange look on Turin's face, what do you understand now? Why my mother is sending me away, said Turin, and tears filled his eyes. Ah, said Sador, and he muttered to himself, but why so long delayed? Then turning to Turin, he said, That does not seem these for tears to me, but you should not speak your mother's counsels aloud to Labadel, or anyone. All walls and fences have ears these days, ears that do not always grow on fair heads. But I must speak with someone, said Turin. I have always told things to you. I do not want to leave you, Labadel. I do not want to leave this house or my mother. But if you do not, said Sador, soon there will become an end of the house of Hador forever, as you must understand now. Labadel does not want you to go, but Sador, servant of Hurin, will be happier when Hurin's son is out of the reach of the Easterlings. Well, it cannot be helped. We must say farewell. Now, will you not take my knife as a parting gift? No, said Turin. I am going to the elves, to the king of Doriath, my mother says. There I may get other things like it. But I shall not be able to send you any gifts, Labadel. I shall be far away and all alone. Then Turin wept, but Sador said to him, Hey, no, where is Hurin's son? For I heard him say not long ago, I shall go as a soldier with an elf king as soon as I am able. Then Turin stayed his tears and said, Very well. If those were the words of the son of Hurin, he must keep them and go. But whenever I say that I will do this or that, it looks very different when the time comes. Now I am unwilling. I must take care not to say such things again. It would be best indeed, said Sador. So most men teach, and few men learn. Let the unseen days be. Today is more than enough. Now Turin was made ready for the journey, and he bade farewell to his mother, and departed in secret with his two companions. But when they bade Turin turn and look back upon the house of his mother, then the anguish of parting smote him like a sword, and he cried, Morwen, Morwen, when shall I see you again? But Morwen, standing upon her threshold, heard the echo of that cry in the wooded hills, and she clutched the post of the door so that her fingers were torn. This was the first of the sorrows of Turin. Early in the year after Turin was gone, Morwen gave birth to a child, and she named her Nienor, which is mourning. But Turin was already far away when she was born. Long and evil was his road, for the power of Morgoth was ranging far abroad. But he had as guides Gethron and Gethnir, who had been young in the days of Hador. And though they were now aged, they were valiant, and they knew well the lands, for they had journeyed often through Beleriand in former times. Thus by fate and courage they passed over the shadowy mountains, and coming down between the vale of Sirion, they passed into the forest of Brethil, and at last, weary and haggard, they reached the confines of Doriath. But there they became bewildered, and were enmeshed in the mazes of the queen, and wandered lost among the pathless trees until all their food was spent. There they came near to death, for winter came cold from the north, but not so light was Turin's doom. Even as they lay in despair, they heard a horn sounded. Beleg, the strongbow, was hunting in that region, for he dwelt ever on the marches of Doriath, and he was the greatest woodsman of those days. He heard their cries and came to them, and when he had given them food and drink, he learned their names and whence they came, and he was filled with wonder and pity. And he looked with liking upon Turin, for he had the beauty of his mother and the eyes of his father, and he was sturdy and strong. What boon would you have of King Thingol? Said Beleg to the boy. I would be one of his knights, to ride against Morgoth and avenge my father, said Turin. That may well be when the years have increased you, said Beleg. For though you are yet small, you have the makings of a valiant man, worthy to be a son of Hurin the Steadfast, if that were possible. For the name of Hurin was held in honor in all the lands of the elves. Therefore Beleg gladly became the guide of the wanderers, and he led them to a lodge where he dwelt at that time with other hunters. And there they were housed while a messenger went to Menegroth. And when word came back that Thingol and Melian would receive the son of Hurin and his guardians, Beleg led them by secret ways into the hidden kingdom. Thus Turin came to the great ridge of the Iskaldwin, and passed the gates of Thingol's halls. And as a child he gazed upon the marvels of Menegroth, which no mortal man before had ever seen, save Beren only. Then Gethron spoke the message of Morwen before Thingol and Melian. And Thingol received them kindly, and set Turin on his knee in honor of Hurin, mightiest of men, and of Beren his kinsman. And those that saw this marveled, for it was a sign that Thingol took Turin as his foster son, and that was not at that time done by kings, nor never again by elf lord to man. Then Thingol said to him, Here, son of Hurin, shall your home be, and in all your life you shall be held as my son, man though you be. Wisdom shall be given to you beyond the measure of mortal men, and the weapons of the elves shall be set in your hands. Perhaps the time may come when you soon shall regain the lands of your father in Hithlum, but dwell now here in love. Thus began the sojourn of Turin in Doriath. With him remained for a while Gethrun and Grethnir his guardians, though they yearned to return again to their lady in Dorloman. Then age and sickness came upon Grethnir, and he stayed beside Turin until he died. But Gethrun departed, and Thingol sent with him an escort to guide him and guard him, and they brought words from Thingol to Morwen. They came at last to Hurin's house, and when Morwen learned that Turin was received with honor in the halls of Thingol, her grief was lightened. And the elves brought also rich gifts from Melian, and a message bidding her return with Thingol's folk to Doriath. For Melian was wise and far-sighted, and she hoped thus to avert the evil that was prepared in the thought of Morgoth. But Morwen would not depart from her house, for her heart was yet unchanged, and her pride still high. Moreover, Nienor was a babe in arms. Therefore she dismissed the elves of Doriath with her thanks, and gave them in gift the last small things of gold that remained to her, concealing her poverty. And she bade them take back to Thingol the helm of Hador. But Turin watched forever for the return of Thingol's messengers, and when they came back alone, he fled into the woods and wept, for he knew of Melian's bidding, and he had hoped that Morwen would come. This was the second sorrow of Turin. When the messengers spoke Morwen's answer, Melian was moved with pity, perhaps perceiving her mind, and she saw that the fate which she foreboded could not lightly be set aside. The helm of Hador was given into Thingol's hands. That helm was of grey steel adorned with gold, and on it were graven runes of victory. A power was in it that guarded any who wore it from wound or death, for the sword that hewed it was broken, and the dart that smote it sprang aside. It was wrought by Telkar, the smith of Novgorod, whose works were renowned. It had a visor, after the manner of those that the dwarves used in their forges for the shielding of their eyes, and the face of one that wore it struck fear into the hearts of all beholders, but was itself guarded from dart or fire. Upon its crest was set in defiance a gilded image of Glaurung the dragon, for it had been made soon after he first issued from the gates of Morgoth. Often Hador, and Galdor after him, had borne it in war, and the hearts of the host of Hithlum were uplifted when they saw it towering high amid the battle, and they cried, "Of more worth is a dragon of Dorthomen than the gold worm of Angbad." But Hurin did not weld the dragon helm with ease, and in any case he would not use it, for he said, "I would rather look on my foes with my true face." Nonetheless, he accounted the helm among the greatest heirlooms of his house. Now Thingol had in Menegroth deep armories filled with great wealth of weapons, metal wrought like fish's mail and shining like water in the moon, swords and axes, shields and helms, wrought by Telkar himself, or by his master Gamelzarik the Old, or by Elbenroth's more skilful steel. For some things he had received in gift that came out of Valinor and were wrought by Fëanor in his mastery, than whom no craftsman was greater in all the days of the world. Yet Thingol handled the helm of Hador as though his hoard was scanty, and he spoke courteous words, saying, "Proud were the head that bore this helm, which the sires of Hurin bore." Then a thought came to him, and he summoned Turin, and told him that Morwen had sent to her son a mighty thing, the heirloom of his fathers. "Take now the dragon helm of the north," he said, "and when the time comes, wear it well." But Turin was yet too young to lift the helm, and he heeded it not because of the sorrow of his heart. And that is the first 4 chapters of The Children of Hurin, one of the greatest tales by J.R.R. Tolkien, and one of the saddest in his legendarium. We have copies of it here at the Morgan Library, also at Lauder, Governor Square, and at Pike Road. Please check it out if you are a fan of the Prince of Fantasists, as Tolkien was called, for it is a great story and worth the read. Until that day, this is Word of Mouth, and I'm Will Byrne. Thanks for watching.